And happy Sabbath, everybody. It is a great privilege and blessing to be here today on a very cold but very bright day outside. And today is a very special day to me for several reasons. One, it's the Sabbath. It's always a blessing when it is the Sabbath. Number two, I have my mom with me today, and I have not had the blessing of having her in church with me in a very long time, so it's a great blessing to have her with me. And the third blessing today marks 2 years that I've been coming to this church. So that is very exciting to me. I feel very blessed to be part of this church family. So as we begin our study, which is titled Bearers of Light, let us start at the very beginning. Let's turn in our Bibles to the book of Genesis. And in Genesis chapter 1 and verse 1, the Word of God says, "In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth." And in verse 2, the Word of God says, "And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And evening and morning were the first day." So it's kind of hard to imagine that at some point in this world's history, there was no sun, there were no stars, there was no moon, there were no lights, there was nothing. Just a mass with water, a dark mass with water. Now we know that God went further than just creating light. He went and made the world as we live today. Now, what about the spiritual world? You know, a lot of things in the Bible can be applied to the spiritual sense. This is volume 5, 158, paragraph 1. It says, "Moral darkness, like a funeral pall, covers the earth. All manner of false doctrines, heresies, and satanic deceptions are misleading the minds of men." So today, just as in the beginning, the world was a very dark place, there was no light, here we are told that moral darkness or spiritual darkness has overtaken, has totally covered the world. And if you don't believe me, just step outside this church. Go in downtown. Go in any big city. Look in the newspaper. Read the obituaries. Read the headlines. You can see that this world is anything but a bright and joyous place. I mean, how many of us that are maybe more than 40 years old could have ever imagined that the world would change so much for the bad than how it was when you were a kid? I mean, it's so bad now that even in my small community, I mean, there's places you shouldn't even go after dark. I mean, in a small town, this world is going downhill. Lives are being taken for no reason. People are committing crimes for the most petty things. This world is a very dark place. So, if there is moral darkness, how is it going to be overcome? Well, in the very same way that darkness was overcome in Genesis, we need light. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. So today, just as we need light to overcome physical darkness, we must also have moral light to overcome the moral darkness that is in the world. Now, what is light? Pretty basic. Light is something that makes vision possible. It's very simple. If it's dark, I don't know if anybody here has actually experienced total darkness. Maybe, has anybody here ever been somewhere where it was totally dark? No light source at all. How does it feel? Alone. Yeah, it's a very interesting feeling to say the least. So light is something that makes vision possible. So what is our source of spiritual light? Let's turn our Bibles to John chapter 8 and verse 12. John chapter 8 and verse 12. And this is Jesus himself speaking. He says, Then spake Jesus again unto them, saying, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but have everlasting life. This shall have the light of life. Now, here we see in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 14, Jesus tells the disciples something else. He says, Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. So we might be sitting here saying, that's quite simple. Jesus is the light of the world, and we, his followers, are to bear that light. It's a little more deep than it sounds. There's a principle we have to understand. Let's go in our Bibles to Acts chapter 3. In the book of Acts chapter 3 and verse 6, this is the story of Peter and John walking to the temple to pray, and they met a lame man who was out begging for money. Now, being the modest people they were not carrying their money bags with them, so they did not have anything to give him. But let's see what Peter said. He said, Then Peter said, Silver and gold have I none, but such as I have give I thee. And then in the name of Jesus Christ, rise up and walk. From Christ Object Lessons 418, paragraph 5, we are told that no man can impart that which he himself has not received. In the work of God, humanity can originate how much? Nothing. No man can, by his own efforts, make himself a light bearer for God. This is the problem. We naturally, and of ourselves, do not have light in us. Without Christ, we are about as dark as the darkest room you have ever been in. Now, I want to ask y'all a question. How many people here like their lighting in their house a little on the dimmer side? Raise your hands, be honest. I know some of y'all here do, so if you don't raise your hand, I'm going to call you out. Sometimes I do, so I know how it is. Now, what happens if you're in a very dim room and you like your room a little dim, and all of a sudden somebody just flicks every light switch on the wall and it just suddenly becomes bright? What's the reaction? Is it fun? You like it? How do the eyes feel? It's not very pleasant. You know what? It is the same for us spiritually. In John chapter 3, verse 19 through 21, it says, And this is the condemnation, that light is come into the world. But what does the next part say? And men loved darkness rather than light. You know, that same way that we respond when we've been in a dark room for so long and the lights are turned on is the same way that we as humans without Christ respond to light. When the light is come, we are repulsed. It's like, oh, no, turn it off. That's how we naturally are. That's how the natural man is with light. And why does it say that they love darkness rather than light? It says, because their deeds were evil. For everyone that doeth evil hateth the light, neither cometh to the light. Why? Lest their deeds should be reproved. But he that doeth truth cometh to the light, that his deeds may be made manifest, that they are wrought in God. Why do men love darkness rather than light? It's very simple. You know, for those that, well, all of us have parents here. How did it feel when your parents would tell you, don't do something? In the moment, was it a very pleasant thing? Maybe you resented your parent a little bit for it. Now, hopefully when you got older, you realized that your parents just cared about you, and that's why they were telling you those things. But oftentimes, we resent light simply because it reproves our course of action. We want to do what we want to do, and God's standard says something different, so, oh, no, let me just turn the light switches back off. Does that excuse the fact that there's light? Just because we decide that we want to continue in our course of action when God has given us light on something, does that negate the fact that He gave the light to us? What does James chapter 4, verse 17 tell us? Therefore to him that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him it is what? It is sin. Now maybe you might sit here and say, well, all right, I just won't know. I just won't see what the light is. I'll just ignore it. I won't study. If I don't know, I don't have anything to be ignorant of. Well, how does God feel about that? Volume 4, 391, paragraph 1 says, many are going directly contrary to the light many are going directly contrary to the light which God has given to His people. Why? Because they do not read the books which contain the light and knowledge and caution, reproofs, and warnings. So why are many of us in darkness? Because this is shut on our bookshelves. It's that simple. And just because we leave our Bibles on our bookshelves and we don't open them and read them, just because we receive light from God and we say, oh, well, I just won't read that, so I don't know, or I'm just not going to study it, or I'm only going to study things that make me feel comfortable in my life. That doesn't excuse the light that God has revealed to us. It doesn't erase anything. You know, in 2 Peter 1, verse 19, it says, we have also a more sure word of prophecy, whereunto ye do well to take heed, as unto a light that shineth in a dark place, until the day dawn and the day star rise in your heart. You know, when we decide that even though God has given us so much counsel on literally every single aspect of our lives, and we decide, you know what, I'm just not going to pay any attention to it. That is like driving down a very dark back road in your car and switching the headlights off. What do you expect is going to happen? I was driving my service truck one day in the middle of the boonies in Arkansas, and my lights failed. I mean, failed. Every light in the truck cut off. I saw nothing, and thankfully there was nobody behind me. I was able to jam the brakes, and I stopped, and I was this close from going off the road. That's an extreme example, but that is literally how our lives are spiritually. When we decide, you know what, I'm just going to disregard light that God has given me. Now, this quote is addressed to young people. However, it applies to each and every one of us. It says, young men and women, and older men and women too, it says, you are accountable to God for the light that He has given you. This light and these warnings, if not heeded, will rise up in the judgment against you. From volume 2, 123, paragraph 1, it says, accountable beings must walk in the light that shines upon them. If they fail to do this, their light becomes darkness, and their darkness is great in the same degree as their light was abundant. Accumulated light has shone upon God's people, but many have neglected to follow the light, and for this reason they are in a state of great spiritual weakness. You know, brothers and sisters, when God gives us light, and the important thing here is when God gives us light. Not when God gives somebody else light. Too many times we are more worried about everybody else than ourselves. We're focused on, oh, well, he needs to be doing that because he knows better. Or she shouldn't do that because she knows better. And we are forgetting the things that God has clearly shown us. Worry about that first. But so often, when God gives us which part of the light we're going to accept. We're say, oh, well, yes, I agree that we are saved by grace through faith. Maybe we say, yeah, it's the Sabbath. Sure, I'll go to church. I'll worship God. But what if the light that comes strikes at the base of something we really enjoy? What if the light of God counsels us against something that we really enjoy eating? What if the light God has given us counsels us against something that we really enjoy doing? What if the light that God has given us counsels us to get away from an unwise connection or relationship? What if the light God has given us totally reproves our entire course of life? It gets a little more difficult then. And more times than we should admit, we find ourselves disregarding the light simply because we don't want to change. When we allow ourselves to do this, we are literally driving head first off the road without headlights in the dark. And I'm going to ask another question. How many people here are in school or have gone to school? Should be hopefully everybody. If somebody's hasn't ever been to school, we need to talk afterward. Now, when you were having your exams, your test, what was normally the minimum grade you could get to pass? A C, so what, about an 80? A 70? That just shows how long I've been out of school. I don't remember the grading system very well. So let's say that the minimum grade you could get to pass in a class is a 70. So when you're going throughout your school year doing your work, what grade are you aiming for? Are you trying to get a 70 or a 100? Good. I've asked that before and I've heard some say 70. So I'm glad we have some diligent students here. But so often spiritually, we do the exact same, we do what some people do. Instead of trying to live up to all the light God has given us, we think, what is the bare minimum that I can do and, not really give up my lifestyle, but then still be somewhat, on good terms with God. I promise you, if we keep on going throughout life with that mindset, it's just like a foolish student, and I'll call it out, it's foolish, that decides to only aim for the minimum. You're going to fail one test, and you're out the class. If we make a habit of only looking at light and only following that which accommodates our lifestyle, it will creep up with us. It will catch up with us spiritually. We think of, even when we think of God's standards for us, like let's take the Sixth Commandment, for example. Of course, we're all say, I'm never going to kill somebody. I couldn't think of that. We'll be quick to say that. But what does Jesus say is the same as murder? Hatred. Has anybody here ever hated somebody? Don't answer. I don't want to know. I don't want to be afraid of you. No, I'm just kidding. But think about it. And hatred, you don't have to say I hate you to hate somebody. Hatred begins in the heart. What about gossiping? What about backbiting, gaslighting, painting wrong pictures of people? It's the same thing. What about the health message? It's very easy for us to say, oh yes, I'm a very healthy person. I'm a vegetarian. Oh, if only it were that easy. Being healthy is a lot broader than not eating 1 or 2 food items. That's 1/100th of the health message. But, we say, oh, I'm fine. I'm vegetarian. I'm a healthy person. I'll say this. I know many meat eaters that are much healthier than a lot of vegetarians are. We need to think about these things. And if we think of all the principles of Christian living, you can always find a minimum if you look hard enough. And you can comfort yourself in that minimum saying, hey, well, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. And when that's our mindset, when we're disregarding all the light that God has given in addition to the basic principles, we're aiming for that 70. When God has given us everything we need for a 100. In Psalm 119, verse 2, it says, "Blessed are they that keep his testimonies, and that seek him with" how much of the heart? 20%, 50%, 70%, 99%. 6 days a week. Got to have 1 day for myself. The whole heart. Now, one thing we have to keep in mind, when it comes to surrendering to Christ, we are either his 100% or 0. There's no middle ground. We either decide to give Christ our entire heart and let his light break forth through all the darkness, or we think, well, you know what? I'm going to surrender my life to Christ, but I just love to gossip. I just love to tell stories about people. Are you Christ? No, you're not. Or what if you say, I'm going to surrender to Christ, but I really enjoy using a substance that is harmful for me. Are you Christ? No. What about if you say, I love Christ, but I just got to have fun 1 day a week? Have you really surrendered to Christ? It's all or nothing. God doesn't give us a 50% off discount in this deal. If we want to be Christ, we have to make a 100% commitment. And once we make that commitment to Christ, we are given a very wonderful promise. 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 17, it says, "Therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is a" what? What type of creature? Old things are, behold, all things become new. Now, when the light of Christ begins to shine, when we allow the light of Christ to permeate the darkness of our hearts, one of the most uncomfortable words in the English dictionary begins to happen. And it's called change. It's inevitable. Light dispels darkness. And once we allow that light to work in our lives, change begins to happen. We might find that there were some things that we used to just love doing that we no longer love to do anymore. I can remember as a young man, thankfully I was blessed. I was raised by a godly mother in a good Adventist home. But I had to at one point make my own personal decision to follow Christ. And when I did, and when I started reading the Bible for myself, not to just read the Bible, but to understand why I had the faith I had. And when I started reading the Spirit of Prophecy, some things started to strike out at me that I never considered before. And there were times where I'm reading like, oh, wow, didn't know it said that. Or sometimes it was like, no, not that, no. It's uncomfortable. It can be a little painful at first. But we just have to remember that Christ is going to be there with us every step of the way. When we allow ourselves to be yoked together with him like we talked about in Sabbath school. He is there not dragging us, but I don't know if anybody has ever seen a yoke of oxen. They're together side by side. And that is how Christ is with us when we surrender of Him. He is there with us every single step of the way. When we start to get weak, He encourages us. And you know, there may be many things that we used to do or used to believe that we will find as we start to accept light that we will give up. But you know, we have to remember that with the light of God comes creative power. You know, the same power that when God said it, let there be light, the same power that God had in Genesis to say, let there be light, and to separate the darkness from the light, is the same power that is available to each and every one of us when we make a decision to follow Christ in our lives. From Christ Object Lessons 333, paragraph 1, we are told, as the will of man cooperates with the will of God, it becomes omnipotent. Whatever is to be done at His command, so whatever God bids us to do, whatever is to be done at His command, may be accomplished in His strength. All His biddings are enablings. In 2 Corinthians 4, verse 6, it says, for God who commanded the light to shine out of darkness have shined in our hearts. Why? Just so that we can be better people? Not just that. To give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. You know, there is nothing selfish. There is nothing withholding about the character of God. You know, anything He has is there to be shared. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 16, it says, let your light so shine before men. Why? That they will think you're a better person? No. It says so that they will see your good works and do what? And glorify your Father, which is in heaven. How many of us are ready for Jesus to come back? Oh, no hands. All right, one brave soul. We should all be ready for Jesus to come back. What is one of the criteria for Jesus coming back? Let's go to Matthew chapter 24. This is the last thing that must take place. Matthew chapter 24 and verse 14, it says, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in how much of the world? In all the world, for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. Now, you know, Jesus was on this earth for how many short years? 33 and a half. How long has it been since Jesus stepped foot on this earth? Long time? It's a good answer. Been a very long time. So how is this going to happen? How is the gospel going to go forth to all the world? From Testimony Treasures, Volume 2, 545, Paragraph 2, we are told that we are to be channels of light to the world, imparting to others the light we receive from the great light bearer. Now, this might sound very simple. Oh yeah, I just have to share Christ with those I'm around. Well, let me ask y'all something. For those here that are married, have been married, or are in a relationship right now, when you're talking about your significant other, are you ashamed of them? Do you really love them? Are you embarrassed to be seen with that person in public? Are you, when somebody asks about them, are you just like, If you truly love somebody, no, absolutely not. When that person is going through something, are you just going to act like it's not going on? No, not if you love them. You're not going to be ashamed of that person. When somebody is talking down on that person, are you just going to sit there and listen and not defend them? Not if you really love them. That's an easy decision for those of us that have anybody we love and care about. Now I'm going to ask another question. And this is a very elementary question. But do we love Jesus? Do we love Jesus? Most people are very quick to say, yes, I love Jesus. Oh, I love Jesus. And their lives dictate quite the contrary. We are very quick to say, oh yeah, I love Jesus, I'm a Christian. But when we go in public, when we leave the comfort zone of our home, when we leave the comfort zone of this church, is our light still shining? Are we still the same Christian on Monday morning that we are Sabbath morning sitting in here? What about if we have relatives that do not have the same faith we have? Are we just as proud of Jesus when we're around them as we are on Sabbath when we're in church? What about at our schools? What about at our jobs? Do the people that we associate with know that there's something different about us? Can they sense the light? In Matthew chapter 5, verse 15, it says, neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. And in Luke chapter 11, verse 33, it says, no man, when he have lighted a candle, putteth it in a secret place, neither under a bushel, but on a candlestick, that they which come in may see the light. Now, how many people here have a smartphone? I'd say mostly everybody at this point has a smartphone. Does it have a flashlight on it? All right. Now, this church is pretty good illumination. What good to the lighting situation in here would it do right now if you turned on that flashlight? I probably couldn't even notice it was on. Now, in the same way, brothers and sisters, if we keep the light that God has given us confined into the walls of this church, we're going to be waiting for Jesus to come back for a very long time. If we keep the light that God has given us confined to our time of personal devotion in the morning, it does no good. It does not do any good. In volume 3, 585, paragraph 3, it says, precious souls are perishing for the light which God has given to men to be reflected upon the pathway of others. But the precious light is hid under a bushel and gives no light to them that are in the house. Now, what happens if you have a candle sitting on your table and it's lit? You put a jar over it. What happens to that candle? It goes out. We forget that sometimes with our spiritual life. If we are not sharing that light, if we are not letting that light be open so that others can be lit by it, sooner or later, our spiritual light can only do one thing, and that's go out. If we are ashamed of Christ in front of others, it's a matter of time before we ourselves are going to stop walking with Him. Volume 4, 52, paragraph 1. God holds you as His debtor, and also a debtor to your fellow men who have not the light and truth. God has given you light, not to hide it under a bushel, but to set it on a candlestick, that all in the house may be benefited. Your light should shine to others, to enlighten souls for whom Christ died. You know, it would be a very sad thing for us in Judgment Day to see somebody and have them say, "You didn't tell me. I didn't know you knew this." That'd be terrible. And you know, the reality of life is we don't know when our last day on this earth is going to come. We don't know when the last day on earth is going to come for our friends, for our relatives, for our coworkers, for our classmates. We don't know. Life is so short. Why not? And you know, it's not about preaching a sermon to them or giving them a Bible study or trying to prove every position of Christianity. Just live the light. If God tells you to say additional, say it. But just live Christ. Be a light. You never know. I believe that if we do this, we're going to have people in heaven come up to us and say, thank you for just showing me by the way you lived that there was a better way. Now, some of us may be sitting here saying, I really can't do this. I can't share Christ. It's so hard. I'm not a minister. I'm not an elder or a Bible worker. I've never worked for the church. My light is so insignificant compared to the darkness in this world. Has anybody here ever lit a room with an oil lamp? Nobody? Brother Joe has, Sister Ben. Okay, so we got a few that have lit a room with an oil lamp. How would you describe the light that comes from an oil lamp? Not very bright. Okay, I can echo with that. Now, this picture, and for some of y'all that have heard me preach before, I've used that as my background sometimes. That is a picture I actually took. That is my bedroom that I had at the place I lived in Arkansas. And that was my light for my bedroom. Now, compared to modern day lighting, that light is very insignificant. But I am very able to read my Bible, to go to bed, to, make the bed when I woke up in the morning with that light. Brethren, I don't care how small or insignificant you think you are. If you have Christ in your life, in a world full of total darkness, that little light will go a very long way. It will go a very long way. I don't know if anybody has ever been in an open field, like just an open, flat, maybe a grain field or a hay field in the Midwest. There's nothing, believe me. There's nothing. It is farmland for miles. You can't see a thing. And the little tiny one round 6-volt headlight on my Ford farm tractor was plenty enough to get me through the miles of that field. And we might get discouraged and say, well, I'm the only Christian in my home. I'm the only Christian in my school. I'm the only Christian at my job. But that's all God needs. Because when there's total darkness, any light is going to stand out. Proverbs chapter 4, verse 18 says, but the path of the who? The path of the just is as the shining light that shineth more and more unto the perfect day. So when we think about a path, the path is let's say I'm walking through the snow. Well, I leave a path. So the way in which I walk spiritually, not the words I say, those can help too, but just the way I live, if I'm living in accordance with Christ, that in itself is a path that is going to lead others to that light. And this is one of my favorite verses. 1 Peter 2:9, it says, but ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people. Why? That ye should show forth the praises of him who have called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Second Selected Messages 167, paragraph 3. How exalted a position it is. We all want to have a good position. Look at this. How exalted a position it is to be a co-laborer with Jesus Christ, a light bearer to the world, shedding light and love upon the pathway of others. This is volume 8, 45, paragraph 4. It says, he who commanded the light to shine out of darkness, He who has called us out of darkness into his marvelous light bids us let our light shine brightly before men, that they may see our good works and glorify our Father who is in heaven. In such rich measure has light been given to God's people that Christ is justified in telling them that they are the light of the world. Now, that's a very special thing. Christ literally entrusted one of the most important things in life to us. When he went to heaven, he placed a lot in our hands. We have to continue that work. Testimonies to Ministers 31, paragraph 2. We have many duties to perform because we have been made the depositories of sacred truth to be given to the world in all its glory. We are debtors to God to use how much? Just 50% of it? To use every advantage. Even the ones that talk against things that we like to do. Every advantage, brothers and sisters. He has entrusted us to beautify the truth by holiness of character and to send the messages of warning and of comfort, of hope and love to those who are in the darkness of error and sin. Now pay close attention to those different things. Too often in the world today, we are very good with the comfort, the hope, and the love. And at the expense of letting people feel comfortable and accepted, we forget the warning part. It's not. If somebody is, let's say they're falling asleep while they're driving. Well, when you fall asleep, obviously you can't see what you're doing. And they are hitting off the road. Should I just sit there and, they're going to go off the road, I'll just let it happen? No. I'm going to tap you, and if you're really asleep, I'm going to reach over like I've had to do with people and yank that steering wheel. If you see somebody a child about to run out in the road, and a car's coming, are you going to say, they're comfortable right now. They're loving playing. I'm just going to let them run. That would be horrible. It's love that motivated God to give us the warnings he's given us. And it's love for others that motivates us to let the light of Christ shine out of our lives. When young men and women are so sober-minded and cultivate piety and devotion, they will let their light shine forth to others, and there will be vital power in the church. Now, this one is very important. We talked about this when we talked about the illustration of putting that jar over the lamp. The spiritual life of the church can only be kept alive only as the members make personal efforts to win souls to Christ. A church that does not work for souls is a dead church. It's a church that is going to slowly but surely extinguish. And I'm sure we've all heard this one at some point. This is actually Apostles, page 9, paragraph 1. The church is God's appointed agency for the salvation of men. It was organized for service, and its mission is to carry the gospel to the world. From the beginning, it has been God's plan that through his church shall be reflected to the world his fullness and his sufficiency. The members of the church, those whom he has called out of darkness into his marvelous light, are to show forth his glory. The church is the repository of the riches of the grace of Christ, and through the church will eventually be manifest even to the principles and principalities and powers in heavenly places, the final and full display of the love of God. So as we close today, brothers and sisters, we need to ask ourselves each a very important question. Are we going to allow the light of Christ to shine in our lives? When God gives us light, are we going to put a lid over the candle? Or are we going to allow it to shine in our lives? What are we going to do with the light God has given us? Are we going to maybe keep rejecting it like some of us might be doing? Or are we going to allow it to shine and reveal spots in our character that need perfecting by the grace of Christ? From letter 16, 1893, we are told God is leading out a people. He has a chosen people, a church on the earth, whom He has made the depositories of His law. He has committed to them a sacred trust and eternal truth to be given to the world. You know, brothers and sisters, God desires to use each and every one of us. He desires to use this church. He desires to use anybody that is living up to His standard and reflecting His principles. But you know, God had the same noble plans for the Jews. And look at what happened to the Jews. Are they the reflectors of the light right now? Fortunately not. They're very good people. So, brothers and sisters, we have to make a decision, both individually and as a church, to let that light shine. Because if we don't, we're going to be here for a very long time. So may we all allow the light that God has given us to not just shine in our lives that we would be more like Christ, but that we would reflect Christ to each and every one of those that we are around. Amen.